Hello friends, welcome to another video of Hybridacademy and to another session of Learn Adobe Photoshop for Beginners. This is the second part of image corrections and adjustments, and here we will learn some more options how we can correct the images and adjust the images. To begin with, let's review the course agenda for today's session. So in today's session of image correction and adjustment part 2, we will learn how to make colors more vivid, how to make color adjustments, that is black and white and sepia, how to blur and sharpen images, and how to brighten images. Let's quickly start off with today's session, how to make colors more vivid. These days the cameras are constantly tweaked, improved and loaded with a lot many new features so that they are able to offer more and more options for photographers wanting to capture the nearly endless rainbow of colors on the spectrum. No matter the equipment is advanced, with optimum lighting or subject, we can't always achieve the sheer brightness and saturation desired for a vibrant look. So we rely on Adobe Photoshop, which offers two different ways to make colors in digital photograph look more vibrant. Doing so in Adobe Photoshop won't affect the original image or destroy the integrity of the captured image. Instead, will enhance the colors to outglow and show more vividness and vibrance. Let's see how we can do this in Photoshop. In Adobe Photoshop, we have inserted the image which we want to edit or for which we want to make the colors vibrant or vivid. Now by default, this image is on layer 0 and we'll create a copy of this layer by pressing Ctrl+J in Windows and Command+J in case of Mac. We have created this layer so that we can apply the effects on the new layer, and later we can compare these both layers whether the effect has actually been applied or not. We will now select the new layer and we'll go to Image, go to Adjustments, and we will select Vibrance. Now this gives us two different options. One is the vibrance and the second is saturation. Vibrance is the glow or the shine or the vibrance of the color which is there in the image. If we extend this or increase this, you can see the colors glow out a bit dark and more pleasant. Whereas if we decrease this, the colors fade out and it looks more like white. So we'll increase the vibrance to 100% or +100. The second is saturation. This is the saturation of colors in the image, and we will increase this to, let's say, 15 or 20. So now you can see the colors have glown out and they are looking more vivid. We'll click on OK. And now with the new layer we can compare the old layer and you can see how the colors have come up so good, so vibrant and so vivid. We can also apply this option using the adjustment layer as we did in case of levels and curves. So we can go to new adjustment layer and we can again select vibrance. Now this option will be available on the right hand side in the layers panel, and you can see a new adjustment layer is inserted. Now using the properties we can again increase the vibrance to 100% and we can increase the saturation, let's say around 20-25. Now in the layer section, if you see, this new adjustment layer has been created, and if we remove this adjustment layer, the picture again goes back to the original with the faded colors. Whereas if we apply this adjustment layer, the colors come up so vibrant and vivid. Using this option does not affect the original picture quality or does not affect the original picture in any way, and that is remains safe. And these effects are applied over in a new adjustment layer. Moving further, let's see the color adjustments, that is the black and white and the sepia. In graphics and image editing programs, color adjustment is used to change the overall tone of the image and also to remove unwanted colors from the image. Color adjustment changes usually affect the entire image even if we plan a small portion of image to be adjusted. Most image editors like Adobe Photoshop include tools for adjusting the hue and intensity of colors as well as adjusting the overall color balance in image. These adjustments are necessary because camera image sensors sometimes fail to record true colors and produce colors that are out of balance in one or more ways. Let's know how to make an image black and white. Photoshop converts the colors in the image to black, white, and shades of grey. Please note, this technique minimizes the file size but discards the color information and can convert adjacent colors to exact same shade of grey. A grayscale or grey level image is simply one in which the only colors are shades of grey. The reason for differentiating such images from any other sort of color images is that less information needs to be provided for each pixel. The interaction of colors between layer blending modes changes when the mode changes. So to make a picture grayscale or black and white in Adobe Photoshop, we open the file in Photoshop, we go to Image menu, we select Mode and we select Grayscale. Once we select this, it gives us an option to flatten the image. So this basically flattens the image and merges all the adjustment layers below that. And then it gives the option to discard. So after flattening, all the adjustment layers get discarded. Photoshop converts the colors in the image to black, white and the shades of grey. Let's see how to make an image in sepia tone. Now the sepia tone is a reddish brown monochrome tint that gives a picture a warm antique appearance. In the early days of photography, photos were developed using sepia, which came from the ink of cuttlefish in the immersion. To give photos a classic, old school feel, we can do so by adding a sepia filter in Photoshop. This simple step will add an antique look to the images that can be really appealing. Here's how to do it. So to apply the sepia tone onto a photo in Photoshop, there are separate ways for colored image and grayscale image. If the image is colored, we first need to desaturate that to convert that into a black and white image. So to do that, we go to the Image menu, we select Adjustments and we select Desaturate. Once this is done, now the image gets converted into a grayscale. Or if the image is already in grayscale, we go to the Image menu, we select Mode and we select RGB color. This color mode makes it easy to convert the picture into sepia. Then we again go to the Image menu, we select Adjustments and we select Photo Filter. From the Filter dialog box, we select the filter as sepia and check the preview. At the bottom of Photo Filter window or the dialog box, there is an adjustment for the density of the sepia effect. We can adjust the density slider as per our requirement, and then once it is done, we can click on OK. Let's see how to do this black and white effect and sepia effect in Adobe Photoshop. In Adobe Photoshop, to convert an image to black and white, we have added an image to Photoshop, and now we'll follow the steps which we learned just before this to convert this image into a black and white mode or a grayscale mode. So to do this, we'll go to the Image menu, we'll go to Mode and we'll select the second option which says Grayscale. Once we click on this, it will ask us the option that changing the modes can affect the appearance of layers. Flatten image before making the mode change. So we'll select Flatten. Once we do this, it will discard all the adjustment layers or the layer below that. And once we click on Discard, this image gets converted to black and white, and you can see the background layer which was below this picture got merged and got flattened into the single layer. Moving further, let's see how to convert an image to sepia tone. Now to convert a colored image to sepia tone, the first step was to desaturate the image. And to do that, we'll go to Image menu, we'll select Adjustment, and in Adjustments, we'll select the option of Desaturate. The shortcut for this is Shift plus Control plus U in case of Windows and Shift plus Command plus U in case of Mac. So once we click on this, you can see that this image gets converted to a black and white image. Now this is actually a desaturated image. in technical words and not a grayscale or not a black and white. Now the next step we'll again perform, we'll go to image menu, go to adjustments, and we'll select photo filter. Now once we do this, we get multiple filter options available, and one of these is sepia effect. Once we click on this, it gives us the filter sepia, and below this has the density, how much sepia intensity we want in our picture. We can increase up to 100%. Depending on our requirement, we can adjust this. Let's keep it to 75 and we click on OK. So now you can see this picture got converted into a sepia effect. This can also be done using the adjustment layer. So I'm going to undo this. Now this adjustment layer does not have the option of desaturation, but yes, it does have the option of photo filter. So we'll select the layer in which we have our image, and we'll go to create new adjustment layer button at the bottom right corner of the layers palette, and from here we'll select the option of photo filter. Doing this will actually add a new layer, new adjustment layer on top of our selected layer, and under the properties we can again change the density and we can select the filter whichever we want, like sepia, and if I change this to 75, this will be exactly what we initially selected. Now apart from this sepia filter, we also have some other filters available, like warming filter, like cooling filter, we have red, we have yellow, we have orange, we have violet. So whichever effect you wish to give, deep red, then we have deep emerald, we have underwater. So whichever effect you wish to select, you can select that filter and you can select the density of the effect you want to apply. And once you do this, this effect is given in the adjustment layer, and based on your requirement you can adjust, you can use or you can remove the adjustment layer, and this adjustment is being applied to the image. Moving further, let's see how to make color and tone adjustment to our picture. In Adobe Photoshop, the hue saturation tool is one of the many options we can use to make colorful changes to an image. Whether designing a brand new graphic or simply touching up an already existing image, we can simply tweak the colors that are already naturally in the photo or even change them altogether, such as changing all shades of blue to red. The hue saturation tool is good to use if you want to make a new graphic based on an already existing image and really want the colors to pop or fade out. Let's see how we can do this in Photoshop. Now in Adobe Photoshop, to apply the hue saturation option, we can go to the image menu, we can go to adjustments, and from here we can select hue/saturation. This has a shortcut key of Ctrl plus U, and in case of Mac we can use it as Command plus U. So once we click on this, this gives us a new dialog box which is for hue and saturation. This dialog box has three different options. One is hue, then we have saturation and the lightness. Hue is basically the color of hue which we want to change on this particular image, and based on the slider you can see that the image is getting changed. However, you can see that whatever changes we do is getting applied on the complete image. Saturation is the saturation of color which we have selected in hue. So suppose I have selected the green color, and the more I increase the saturation, you can see that the green color gets highlighted, and the more I reduce it, it gets desaturated or it gets dull. The last one is the lightness. So the more I increase this, the picture will become light, and the more I decrease it, the picture will become dark. So based on these three settings, we can change the hue and saturation of any image. Let me reset this image. And as discussed earlier, to reset we need to press the Alt key or the Options key on the keyboard. Alt in case of Windows and Options in case of Mac, and the cancel button changes to reset. Once we click this, this will take us back to the default image. Now we also have an option of colorize in the hue saturation dialog box. If I click on this, now based on the hue I have selected, the complete image changes the color. So whichever color I take this to, this is yellow, this is green, then light blue, dark blue, magenta, red, whichever color I take this to, it will colorize the complete picture accordingly. See, this goes to blood red. Now let's again reset this picture. Now this is in case if I wish to change the complete picture color. Whereas if I only wish to change the color of these balloons, suppose I want these balloons to match somewhere with the shirt of this girl, I can select the color of balloons that is somewhere near yellow, and once I click on this, you can see that these droppers get highlighted. Using these droppers, I can select the color which I wish to change. So suppose I wish to change this yellow color. Now once I select this, there are two sliders at the bottom. The top one shows the actual color we wish to change, and the bottom one shows the color to which we want to change the selected color. And if you see the slider below this slider shows that the color from this range to this range, which is highlighted with a light gray color, will be changed. And these are the supporting colors which will also get affected. So this is the range of colors which will be affected once I start sliding the hue bar. Let's try to do this. See, now only the color of the balloon is getting changed and not much change is getting reflected on the rest of the picture, like the skin of the girl or other areas of this image. However, if you notice that this yellow color is also there in the shirt of the girl, and that is also getting changed. Now if I wish to keep it very much restricted only to the colors of balloon, I can slide these sliders. For example, I can slide this dark gray a bit inside, and similarly this one also a bit inside, to ensure that only this much color range gets affected, and I can slide these ones also towards inside. So now the range is reduced, and now making any change, now you see only the balloons are getting affected. Now since I have reduced the range, then only this particular area is getting affected. To add this, I can use the plus dropper, and I can click here also. So now you can see this complete balloon got affected, and I can change the color of the balloon as per my choice. Now all these effects can be applied using the adjustment layer as well, as we did other previous adjustments. So I'm cancelling this, and I'm adding an adjustment layer to this. I'll click on new adjustment layer, and from here I will select hue saturation. Now similar to previous effects, this will add an adjustment layer on top of my layer, and from properties again I can make the same changes which we are doing in that dialog box. So let's try to change the color of these balloons. So I'll change the color of yellows. I'll pick up the dropper, I'll select this color, I'll add some color, and I'll pick up this color, and now let's try to change the balloons. So I've made them as red. If you think it's too much of red, you can reduce the saturation. If you think it's too dark, you can lighten it up. So based on your requirement, you can accordingly adjust this. Moving further, let's see how to blur and sharpen images in Adobe Photoshop. A blur is a shape or area which cannot be seen clearly because it has no distinct outline or because it is moving very fast. There are many reasons to blur parts of an image. Blurring backgrounds make the subject stand out. A blur creates a dreamy effect. Using blur, we can add a soft glow to a person's face. And for practical reasons, we use blur to hide the identity details like license plate or phone number, etc. The tools in Adobe Photoshop lets to control blur across the image. In Photoshop, blur can be applied using the blur tool or blur filters like average, blur, blur more, box blur, Gaussian blur, lens blur, motion blur, radial blur, shape blur, smart blur, and surface blur. Blurry photographs occur in many ways. Perhaps the camera is autofocused and it places the focus point incorrectly. Possibly your lens is just too sharp and you have no idea where you are. These problems can arise even with professional lenses. Another one of Photoshop's amazing tools is sharpening your image. Once we have mastered or have the understanding of this, we can alter any image of our choice. Image sharpening is a process that can be used to improve the overall appearance and quality of digital photos. It can be used to correct a number of issues including blurriness, poor contrast, and even lens distortion. Sharpening an image is a process that increases the contrast between the objects, making them appear clearer and more defined. Sharpen the photos by using the Sharpen tool in Photoshop or with another option called Unsharp Mask. This type of sharpening works best on high resolution images such as digital camera photos or scanned images because it sharpens the image gradually from one edge to another by increasing contrast along the edges in an image. To apply the Unsharp Mask filter, we go to Filter menu, we choose Sharpen and we select Unsharp Mask. In the Unsharp Mask dialog box, we drag the amount of slider to set the strength of sharpening effect. We drag the radius slider to set the width of sharpening effect at the image edges. And we drag the threshold slider to the right to minimize sharpening of photos. Let's see this in Photoshop. Now in Adobe Photoshop, I'll share two different pictures for some blur options which can be applied on these pictures. So as we discussed, in a picture if we wish to hide some identity information just like the number plate information on this photo, so we can either use the blur effect from the toolbar, that's the blur tool. We can click on this, we can select the blur tool, and once we select the blur tool, we can select the size of the blur tool from the options bar, how bigger and how smaller we want the blur tool be. We can select the hardness of this tool, how much hard you want this to be, and the strength. Strength is actually how much you want this to make the picture blur. So I'm taking this as 100%. And now on this picture, if I try to drag my mouse on this number plate, you can see that gradually this will become blur and at an instance it will be not readable. Now this is a bit slow process and we need to do it, we need to apply it multiple times to make the area blur. But the good part of this is that if you wish to apply this on a small surface or on a small part of the image, it can easily be applied. Now here you can see that the smaller characters have almost got blurred, but the bigger characters are still a bit visible, so we need to apply this more so that they become blurred. This is a bit time taking, but you can see gradually it has become so blurred. Now another way to do this, which would be a bit simpler, would be using the box blur option. Now to do this, I have again moved back to the original picture where the characters are clearly visible using the history option, and now we will select the area using either the lasso tool or using the marquee tool, the area which we wish to make blur. So I'm using the polygonal lasso tool. I'll click on this. I'll select the area which I wish to make blur. I'll select this, like this, like this, like this, and you can see that the area got selected. I'll zoom this so that it is clearly visible. So you can see that this area is right now selected. And now I'll go to filter, I'll select blur, and I'll select the option of box blur. Now based on the radius which I'll select, it will make these characters blur, and you can see at one instance I can see that there is something written on this, but it is not clearly readable and it is totally blur. See, and once I click on OK, you can see that this has completely gone blur and now it's not at all readable. I'm removing the selection, and our purpose is solved much more easily as compared to the blur tool, and this was the option of box blur. So you already seen the blur tool and the box blur option from the filter menu. Going further, let's see another option of blur, but this time I'll try to apply this on a face. Now if you look at the face of this girl, you can see small marks on the face, and if I wish to remove these marks, we can use different blur options to do that. So what we'll do, we'll again go to the lasso tool. This time we'll select simple lasso tool so that we can select the areas randomly. Try to focus this particular spot on the image. I'll again select the color nearby to this. Let's say this color, which is a bit lighter than the previous one. I'll create a new layer and I'll fill the same color in this. And right now you can see there's a spot visible. Let me zoom this. You can see the spot. Now I'll again select this layer. We'll go to filter. I can go to blur and I'll select Gaussian blur. And now I'll reduce the radius for this. Click on OK and I'll remove the selection. Now we can reduce the opacity of this particular patch in a way that it mixes with the skin. Here we go. So now you see patch is not that prominent, and yes, that skin patch is already gone. Now let's also see the option of making a picture sharpen in Adobe Photoshop. Now if you look at this picture, this is really a very beautiful picture, but if you look at it closely, let me just zoom this for you. The picture is actually not so clear and it's a bit blurry. This may be because of out of focus, or maybe the lens was not able to focus exactly on the main section of this picture. So ultimately this picture turned into a blurry picture. And to make this a bit sharpen, or to sharpen some areas of this picture, we can either use the Sharpen tool from the toolbar, which is located here. You can select the Sharpen tool. Again, just like the blur tool, we can select the size, we can select the hardness, and we can also select the strength of this. And now we can try to sharpen the areas of the picture which we wish to, especially the highlights on the face. And now if we try to zoom this picture, you can see that the eyes and the nose and these areas are much more in focus and are a bit more clear as compared to the earlier blur image. Now another way to do this is using the unsharpened mask. I'm going back to the history. I'm going to the original layer. Now to do that, we'll select the layer on which we wish to apply. We'll go to filter, we'll go to sharpen, and we'll select unsharp mask. Now in this we get three different options. The first is the amount, which is the amount of sharpness we wish to apply. Then it's the radius, on how much radius we wish to apply the sharpness, and then the threshold. Now based on these three settings, you can see that there are changes visible on the image, and the more I increase the radius, the more the picture contrast gets highlighted. And you can see that this gets applied to the complete image and not to a particular section like the Sharpen tool. Now once I click on OK, let's try to zoom this picture. So you can see Comparatively, this is a bit more sharper. If you wish to try this once again, we can again apply the same filter, and every time you apply it, you can see that the picture is getting more and more sharper. Moving further to the last section of this session, that is Brighten Images. At times, we end up with an image we really like, but it suffers from an unfortunate exposure problem. It may appear too dark, which is underexposed, or too bright, which is overexposed. In Adobe Photoshop, we not only have some advanced options like levels or curves image adjustment to do a professional level tonal correction, but also a simple way to fix exposure problems without a lot of hassle. The tools in Adobe Photoshop provides option to brighten images. In Photoshop, brightness can easily be applied using dodgetool or brightness contrast adjustments from the image menu. The dodge tool with the shortcut key letter O allows you to lighten specific areas of an image. Simply select the dodge tool, use the options bar to customize the tool settings like brush size, range and exposure, etc., and drag over the part of the image to lighten. To adjust the brightness and contrast of a complete photo, select Image, Adjustment and Brightness Contrast. Adjust the brightness slider to change the brightness of the image. Adjust the contrast slider to increase or decrease the image contrast and click on OK. The adjustments will appear only on the selected layer. Let's see how we can do this in Photoshop. In Adobe Photoshop, I am again using the same example I used for the sharpening of image. Now this image looks like a bit towards the darker side or a bit of underexposed. So to brighten this image, the first thing which we can try is the dodge tool. This is available on the left hand side toolbar. The shortcut for this is letter O, and once we select this, it gives us a circle as a brush tool, and we can again adjust the size and the hardness of this. We can select the exposure, and we can also select what we need to brighten up. So we can either brighten up the shadows or the midtones or the highlights. So right now we'll prefer doing midtone. Once we do this, we can start dragging on the image and you can see that the image is getting brighter. On whichever area I'll apply this, those areas will become brighter as compared to the original one. So this is one way to brighten some sections of an image using the dodge tool. The second option which is available in Adobe Photoshop is using the image adjustment. However, before doing that, I'll go back to the original image. I'm rolling back the history. Now I'll go to image, I'll go to adjustment, and the first option available is the brightness and contrast. Using this, we can increase the brightness of the picture. You can see how bright the picture goes, and similarly we can adjust the contrast also. Now at times you have to reduce the contrast of the picture, and at times you have to increase the contrast of the picture. So based on your requirement or your understanding, you can adjust both these values, and finally we end up brightening our original picture. Now with this we come to the end of our session. Let's summarize this session. So in this session we learned how to make colors more vivid, how to do color adjustments like black and white, sepia and other color tones. We learned to blur and sharpen the images, and we also learned how to brighten the image. In the next session, that is part 3 of lesson 5, we'll learn more about image correction and adjustments, and in that we'll learn how to darken areas in your image. We'll learn about color balance, photo filters, and also about image exposure.
Thank you for joining the complete session. Hope you liked the content. Please share and subscribe our channel so that your friends also get benefited with the information, acquire free knowledge and learn new things. We are eagerly looking forward to your support. Thanks, take care, and stay safe. Hope to see you in the next session.